We are back. You are chatting with John P. Today we are going to be talking about Tudor's new watches. Yes, Tudor has not actually officially unveiled their new watches, but they have been kind of putting out some teasers and things. Nothing specifically about the watches, but kind of just, I guess you would say, the overall feel or aesthetic of maybe their collection. They announced that on April 7th, they're going to be having kind of a virtual unveiling, some type of, digital kind of like Zoom-esque thing that everyone is doing nowadays with, everyone working from home and the lockdowns and all of that. So they're going to be unveiling some watches. I've comprised a list of things that I think would be very smart for Tudor to be doing with their new collection. Talk about a couple of watches they have sitting on the shelf, still on their website that no one buys, and also what I believe a few little tweaks Tudor can make to some of these watches that would allow them to sell so many of them, and they must do a few of these things on this list. But once again, guys, please do not forget to check out delraywatch.com, where I don't know if we have any Tudor in stock, but we have basically everything else, so check that out, delraywatch.com. On the wrist, I have a Rolex Oyster Perpetual Red Grape 39. This watch has all of a sudden become desirable and collectible, and I stopped wearing it for that reason. I kind of like to wear things that are not necessarily people are always looking at, but I just saw someone is trying to sell this watch for something like $8,300 pre-owned for the most entry-level watch in a now deprecated size. Love the watch, but things are getting crazy in Rolex Town. Leave your comments below about that. That takes us into the first point that I think Rolex has to, and they need. I misspoke. Tudor is not Rolex. Tudor needs to double down. Well, technically, if we want to get crazy and nuanced with it, sure, Tudor is owned by Rolex, but nonetheless, Tudor needs to double down on these smaller case sizes. They need to double down on the Black Bay 38 or come out with something in that size. In watches today, I'm noticing a trend that's unbelievable, right? Let's say 8 years ago, 10 years ago, watches started getting really big with brands like Hublot coming out with these huge form factor case sizes, and even the Panerais getting into the larger cases, and that was really hot and popular, and people were genuinely willing to wear really big watches. That's come back down a little bit, and interestingly enough, the 50% of all wrist sizes in the United States, just the US alone, are over 7.25 inches in circumference, and 50% are under, right? I have a 6.5-inch wrist. I fall in that bottom half. But when we start talking about watch sizes, I just don't understand why more brands are actually increasing their case sizes in some of the more popular models, right? Look at the Omega Seamaster. They've gone a little bit bigger with their the Omega Seamaster line, and let's not even get into the Planet Oceans. And then we look at Zenith. They come out with the new Chronomaster Sport El Primero. That's a 41. Rolex even guilty of moving technically into a bigger case size for the Submariner line, arguably one of the most iconic watches ever, and certainly their most iconic watch. And so we see brands just getting into bigger case sizes. Oh, let's not even forget Grand Seiko, which we never, at least myself, I never really consider them to be following trends. They've always seemed to kind of make their own thing and stick to it. They're increasing the case sizes. They have a 40 millimeter case size in their new watch that they unveiled, the White Birch, I believe it's called, whereas the previous collections were kind of sitting at that 39.5 millimeter case size. So we're seeing the cases creep up a little bit into that 41, 42 range, and that leaves Tudor with such an interesting hole or gap in the market to fill, and they've proven that the Black Bay 58 is an absolute knockout, a sellout. It's a watch that has gone in different levels of demand, but it's still loved and cherished by so many. And in the comments, because you guys are great, you always leave really interesting comments, I do see a lot of people time and time again saying, I wish, the Black Bay GMT was in the smaller case size. I wish that they had the Black Bay 58 with XYZ dial bezel combination. So I believe Tudor needs to double down on this case size, and I just see it being basically an ATM machine for them. Imagine if Tudor, and I also want this. I want Tudor to come out with an advisor. So their alarm watch, which is an absolute classic in watches, vintage watches, by the way. But they have a 42 millimeter case size that came out, I don't know, a dozen years ago, maybe a little bit less. But this watch, no one buys the Tudor advisor. It's big, it's clunky. It's just not appropriate, it seems like, for the guy that cherishes that kind of vintage watch case size. Now, I'm kind of just speculating, but at least personally for me, if any of you agree, if Tudor comes out with an advisor, the alarm watch, in a 38 or maybe even 39, let's say they need to squeeze in that alarm movement, that would be an absolute sellout. Can you imagine? I think that would be really great. Tudor, if you're watching, come out with this watch, please. I would love to see it, and I know many people out there would love it as well just because of the case size. So moving on. Oh, by the way, let's not even forget to mention that Rolex discontinued the 39, which, by the way, works for a 6.5-inch wrist, as well as Federico, who has an 8-inch wrist. We both wear the Oyster Perpetual 39. How does that even happen? It's comfortable for both of us. More brands, including Tudor, need to focus on this range. 38.5, 39, do it. Next, Tudor needs to do something with their chronographs. Interestingly enough, they have the black bay chronographs. You got the two-tone or the bicolor, and you have the black dial in stainless steel. And then they also kind of have their heritage vintage inspired after the Monte Carlo chronographs of Tudor's yesteryears, which did go through, especially when they came out, went through a certain level of demand that might not be there any longer. But it's just kind of a product line that they haven't really done a whole lot with. You know, last year or just before, almost a year ago, they did release kind of that bicolor model, which kind of drew on that like vintage inspired layout of some chronographs ones to be remembered, but they haven't really done anything previously, and I think there's just so much room for Tudor to really do something with. Change the bezel, maybe, you know, dare I say, even turn it into a tri-register chronograph, or just do something with it to kind of revitalize that. You can see Tudor is very much invested in that sports watch space, and so in my opinion it makes a lot of sense for them to do something with that chronograph, and a little bit something that is going to be less boring, because while people do like their chronographs, I don't hear from too many watch collectors that they're absolutely chomping at the bit to get one of these Tudor chronographs, considering how many cool, interesting chronographs everyone else is making, including Zenith, El Primero, and the list goes on and on. So Tudor needs to do something with their chronographs right away. Next, the 1926. If you're not familiar, Tudor has this 1926 line that's kind of like a Datejust, but a little bit different. It's like a Jubilee-esque bracelet on it. But the interesting thing about this 1926 lineup is the quality is actually pretty solid, and they're about $2,000. Now, depending on the case size, it goes back and forth. But they make it in 36. I believe they have a 39, and they might even have a larger case size. I'm trying to remember. But the point is, these watches are not really out there. We've had maybe one or two at Del Rey Watch, and they were unworn. You know, I think we got them from dealers, but when I held this watch, I remember, I think we might have had the 39 case size. I was actually shocked that for $2,000 from a brand like Tudor, you could get such a quality, at least quality constructed watch. Now, I think the power reserve wasn't very long, but understandably so for the price point. But other than that, I was pretty impressed. I would say that it was on par, if not better, than a lot of the micro brands in the range, which I know is a little bit funny to say nowadays, but when you consider Tudor factoring in their marketing budget for Lady Gaga and the David Beckhams and the, you know, and the Ben Clooneys and all these guys, yeah, you know, it can be difficult to come out with a watch at an attractive price point, but I think they did it. Unfortunately, their dials are pretty boring except for the blue numerals and lettering on the white. That's kind of an interesting dial combination in my opinion, but considering kind of the OPs that Rolex came out with, kind of their Stella-esque dials this past year, I think it would be very interesting, and I think Tudor should, if they want to sell this watch and they want to have something for people to buy between all of their product lines. If you want to mix in Rolex as well, you can't buy an Oyster Perpetual in the store. Maybe you buy this and it's more approachable in terms of price point. Maybe you put an interesting dial on it, put a yellow dial, put an orange dial, a blue dial. I don't know. I'm not a painter. I'm not familiar with color tones and what people like, but maybe a green dial. People love green. Do something with this 1926. I think they need to. I think they should. I might even consider putting it in my collection as kind of an everyday knock around. I think it's a great idea. Next, Tudor may unveil a new Knisi movement. Now, Tudor has a partnership with Chanel and Breitling in this Knisi movement manufacturer. They produce the in-house movements for, of course, Tudor and some of the others which we've mentioned. Also, Norqain has somewhat recently kind of announced a partnership in using these movements as well, but they only have two kind of baseline form factor movements, but I think they might even be unveiling, I mean, they'll have to sometime in the future, but maybe this is the year where they unveil a new movement. Maybe they start to use their movements in some of their other watches that they have. I mean, they have a compact movement and they have a larger one, the 54 and the 56, the MT 54 and 56. Maybe they have something else with a native complication without having to put a module or something like that. I don't know, but I think they will do something considering the type of investment they're making into the actual manufacturing components and the movements behind the brand. They have to do something with it. Otherwise, they never would have started in the first place. Next, I don't know why Tudor has not done this yet, but they need to immediately kill the Fast Rider in the North Flag product lines. They came out with the North Flag. That was kind of their debut for the new movement line when the North Flag came out. It was, hey, this is our in-house movement, and this is kind of like an integrated version of an Explorer. There's a lot of imagery on the website, the Tudor website, about this kind of being an Explorer's watch. Very similar pictures you would see for something like an Explorer on Rolex, but I just don't see anyone wearing the North Flag. I don't see anyone buying the North Flag. Much like the 26, we may have only had one or two of these through the doors, but Tudor is our third most popular brand. And so when you factor that in, when we get some pretty obscure watches, you can check it out at Del Rey. We're getting one or two North Flags in the last, 5 years. I think that's unbelievable, but it just shows that no one's really buying it. Now, are they producing it? Is it just kind of a relic or an artifact on their website? Not totally sure, but it's in their product catalog. It's out there. And as we know, Rolex doesn't like to leave old products just laying around on their website. You can go to their website right now. Nothing old is there. When it's discontinued, it's discontinued. So they need to kill that. The Fast Rider, I don't know. That was a watch they kind of came out with, partnered up with some celebrities, kind of had a new kind of feel to it. But I feel like Tudor has gone away from this Fast Rider, this transitional era. And with that also came a watch like the Glamour. The Glamour, or the Glamour, however you'd like to pronounce it. I don't understand this product. This is like, in my opinion, a transitional model. It has this, I just don't understand. They label it as kind of like an artistic watch, like a modern watch, but there's just so much overlap between the other products that they have in the lineup. Doesn't make any sense to me to keep it out there. I think it might be on their website just because they have some old stock. They're not willing to gray market and taint their brand. I don't know. Does anyone have a Glamour? I don't want to say anything bad about it. I personally haven't held one. I don't know if they actually produce them. I've not seen them in the stores. Have you seen or do you own a Glamour? I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. And next, I think Tudor has to do something with their Royal lineup. That's their Genta-esque kind of integrated watch to compete. I mean, I say compete, but it's in the same styling cues, in the same vein, not the price point as like an AP, Royal Oak, or a Girard-Perregaux Laureato. You have the Royal, you have a couple sizes, but, traditionally, I think the men's sizes would be the 38 and the 41. That's the larger size. They might have a smaller size as well. Which I'll touch on the sizes in 1 second. But the price point, once again, for a watch in that range, they have a blue dial, $2,200 or $2,900 between the 38 and the 41. I think it's kind of a no-brainer. I've heard some feedback from other collectors, and I also share this opinion, is the bezel's kind of weird. Now, it's kind of like an engine turn bezel that you would see on like a vintage Rolex, like 5500 or 5000 series, you know, they're like kind of like an engine turn bezel that they would have on their old Oyster Perpetuals or the Air Kings. They kind of did something here, but they describe it as a notch bezel. It's a little shiny, and I get it. The word royal is in the watch, so that's kind of what they're going for, the whole Tudor royalty kind of thing. But I'm not sure it really resonated with watch collectors that might be, in my opinion, looking for kind of that integrated style and more of the vein of like an Ingenieur, where it's for kind of the sportsman and not necessarily the guy that wants to like sit on a throne or something. So I think if they change up this, the bezel, a flat bezel or something, maybe take it into like a different finishing instead of like a high shine or a high polish, maybe brush it, maybe mix the finishings on the metal so that it can be in a sports watch, because they have it listed in their website on Tudor's website as a sports watch, but it's really shiny. And I think that's also why you have something like the Chopard Alpine Eagle, which is in the same kind of styling cues as this integrated design, a very shiny, high polish watch without that kind of mixed metal finishing. And do a search. There's almost none of these trading pre-owned, which means they're not really selling brand new, or people are just absolutely enamored to keep it in their collection. But we know that's almost very uncertain or very unlikely to be the case. So something Tudor needs to do, I think they'll do it. Maybe give us a new dial on that, and I think it's probably a home run. Switch up the metal finishing. I don't know. What do you guys think? Leave that in the comments below. Would love to hear your opinions. Do you guys think that Tudor is going to be doing anything else that I did not mention? Maybe your ears are also on the grounds and you've heard some interesting things that might be happening with the brand or the other brands. I'd love to hear it and see it in the comments below. Please do not forget the thumbs up, like, and subscribe. I really do appreciate it. A lot of you guys are not subscribing. Let me know why, or subscribe. Either way, it's appreciated. And don't forget to check out delraywatch.com. Thanks, guys. You've been chatting with John P. Ciao.